Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range to talk about Daewoo rifles. And why are we talking about these rifles? Because I just got back from SHOT Show 2025, and guess what? There's a company called S&T, which is the new name of the Daewoo company who made this rifle. They're going to start production of these rifles right here in the United States. That's what they're saying anyway. And a lot of people were posting pictures and stuff of the new Daewoo rifles, or S&T as it may be. So I have a couple of originals. This is the original K2 rifle. I have the K1 in the shooting shack, and we're just going to talk about these in anticipation of the new S&T rifles hitting the US market hopefully soon. These were great rifles. I had them in the 80s, and they were great alternatives to the AR-15. And if I remember right, it's been a few years, but these are actually lower cost alternatives to the AR-15, which made them quite popular with certain folks out there that didn't want to spend as much money for a Colt AR-15. They could save 50 or 100 bucks and pick one of these up. Again, if I remember right. But anyway, that's why I found them, is because they were low-cost alternatives, but it's also the actual service rifle of the South Korean military. We'll talk a little bit about that history as well. Let's start off doing a little bit of shooting with this. And yeah, great rifles. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. In the 1960s and 1970s, the South Korean military relied heavily on the US government for military aid. And they even went so far as to take M16s from the US government, but they couldn't get enough rifles in aid to supply their entire active duty military nor the reserve military. So then they licensed the M16A1 and started production in Korea of that rifle. But once again, the licensing restrictions didn't give them enough weapons to arm all of their forces effectively, and the cost, in their opinion, was too high, which then forced them to start developing their own rifle. The first rifle they produced was the K1, and that's what this rifle is here. Now, of course, the military version will have a shorter barrel. This one has a US import length of 16 inches because of stupid US laws. But this would be the first rifle that the South Koreans would develop. This rifle is heavily based on the AR-15 M16, and we'll get into that inside the shooting shack. But the first rifle was a direct gas impingement rifle, just like the Stoner design of the M16A1. The later rifle, the actual rifle, because this is a carbine or a submachine gun as they classified it, the rifle that would come later would be a long stroke gas piston, more like the AK, but with elements of the AR-15 M16 as well. And again, we'll talk about that here in a moment. So this was the first rifle that would have been adopted right around 1984-85 by the South Korean military as they spun up production for the K2 actual military service rifle. Now, this one has the wire stock on it, which is has a couple of different positions. So when you collapse it, here's your little button right here that collapses it, but it doesn't lock it in the collapsed position. It'll pull out if you just yank on it, and then you can take it in one step if you want a little bit shorter, like if you're wearing body armor or something like that. But we'll get into the full features of the rifle here in a little bit. Very cool little gun and a lot of fun to shoot. So as I already talked about earlier in the video, the K1 carbine that you see here, which was again classified as a submachine gun, if I recall correctly, this was the first rifle produced by Daewoo. Now, Daewoo has gone through a couple of different name changes, and currently it's S&T Motive that the company goes by. They have, according to what information we got from SHOT Show this year, they have set up production in Las Vegas, Nevada, to start producing these guns domestically as the S&T. Now, these are marked Daewoo, again, because these are early pre-ban rifles that I've had for many years. But let's take a look at these because they really do offer some really cool features. Now, the K1, as I mentioned, is a direct gas impingement, while the K2 is an actual long stroke gas piston gun. Let's take a closer look at the K1 here really quickly. So you have a magazine release here, just like a standard AR-15 M16, and you're going to see a lot of crossover here between this rifle and the AR-15 M16. So there's your mag release, and of course we're not going to have any EMB controls. This rifle kind of predates that whole thing. You can't put it on safe with the bolt lock to the rear, but we'll talk about the safety here in a second. So I've already talked about the collapsible stock. Again, you have a little button here, and you can adjust it for length of pull. This is your takedown lever, which would evolve from the K1 to the K2, and we'll talk about that. The rear sight, which has evolved as well. We have just a flip-over sight, very similar to what you'd find on the M16A1, where you have a very small aperture for precision shots, and you have an open aperture for combat shooting or CQB or that type of firing. Then the rear sight is adjustable for windage, and it looks just like it's borrowed directly from the M16A1. Same with the front sight, A1 style post, and it uses a standard AR-15 sight tool to adjust for elevation in the front and windage here in the rear. This is cast aluminum, upper and lower receivers, uses standard Stenag magazines, a NATO standard. It does have a reciprocating charging handle, so it will cycle every time the weapon fires. You have a hand guard here, very similar to the FAL. It's two halves that are held together by a single screw. And then we have the 16-inch barrel, which again is for U.S. import. Here you have the cast block, and this is where the direct gas impingement tube goes into the rifle. So to field strip it, you want to make sure the weapon's empty. So we have the magazine out. Just check that chamber, make sure it's clear. Then you have this little button right here in the rear. You're just going to push forward on this button, and it will just hinge open just like an AR-15. And then you just take the recoil spring out. Now take a look at the recoil spring and guide rods. So there's two springs, kind of AR-80, 180-ish, right? And then you take the bolt and carrier out. You'll pull the charging handle to the rear. This will just slide out. And then here is your bolt and carrier group. Now you can see the AR-15 M16 style bolt. It is direct gas impingement. Here's the key, like an AR-15 key, just a little bit longer, slightly different design. This is to keep it from rotating. This rides in the top slot. And then it disassembles just like a standard AR-15 cotter pin. Firing pin comes out, take the cam pin out, and you can take the bolt out. So there's a lot of crossover there with the AR-15. If you look inside, you can see the fire mechanism. Now here's the safety. And on these, it goes from safe, it rotates all the way around 180 degrees to semi. And then you can see the trigger is definitely based on AR-15 M16, but the hammer has had some pretty serious modifications to it. This is your ejector, which is really kind of cool. So if you look at the face of the rifle, you'll notice it doesn't have that plunger that a standard AR-15 M16 would have. A little plunger with a spring that flicks the case out. This has a fixed ejector like an AK or other rifles, and it'll definitely get that spent case out of there. Then you have your bolt hold, bolt release right there, very much just like an AR-15 M16. The biggest difference being you'll notice this big block on the side that it sets in, and you don't have the ability to push on the bottom of it to manually lock that open like you would on an AR-15. So it's a little bit different. Now you'll notice it's also stepped out because this stock has to ride behind it, which is really kind of cool. All right, so let's kind of close this up here for a second. It won't stay closed because I got, there we go. I'll slide that forward a bit, and the stock will keep it from hinging open. And let's just grab a screwdriver here real quick, and I can show you what the DI system looks like underneath the handguard here. There we go. All right. Take your screw out, and then there's your two halves. Come off. Come off. There you go. Now you can see the direct gas impingement. And you can see that it's very similar to the AR-15 M16 here with the barrel nut as well, which is exposed when the handguard is sitting there. You can see how the handguard kind of fits inside, leaving the barrel nut exposed. So very lightweight. It's very much like an AR-15 M16 in terms of how the heft and feel of it. Now you will notice that on this particular rifle, there's no facilities on top here on this early rifle for any type of optics mounting. That would change with the K2. When you look at the front, you can see the two holes here with the guide rods set. And of course you have just standard sling swivels that would have been popular and look like they're borrowed right from the AR-15 M16 as well, back in the era when this rifle was being manufactured. All right, so there's the K1. Let's take a look at the K2, and of course do some more shooting with these bad boys, because that's the best part. All right, so let's take a look at the K2. This is the rifle that came after the carbine, and they made some significant changes to it. So let's start off back here on the rear. So instead of the wire telescoping stock, we now have a side folding stock that will lock in the folded position. And then to unlock it, you just kind of pull down again and extend it. So there's no buttons or anything. It's just a simple matter of pulling it down. And it works very smoothly. It's maintained the same selector lever arrangement. Both pistol grips have storage compartments in them. I didn't point that out on the K1, but they both have this. And you'll notice it looks very much like an A1 style pistol grip, although it's obviously different, but it has the same bakelite texture to it and profile in some aspects. We have our standard sling swivels, again, borrowed directly from the K1 or the M16. We have the same ping pong paddle control over here with the big hump that it sets in with no ability to push on the bottom of it to manually lock the bolt open. You will also notice that they've made changes to the takedown lever, if you will, back here. So on the original K1, there was no safety. You could just push forward and it would just hinge open. All right? It's just under spring pressure that kept it closed. Apparently, they found that to be problematic, so this has a locking system on it. So right now it's in the locked position. Flip this little lever back, that's unlocked, and that'll allow it to move forward and hinge open. When it's in the locked position, it hits the receiver and the gun can't come open unintentionally. So to field strip it, you would then flip it to that position, push it forward, then hinge the gun open, and we'll do that here in a moment. The rear sight is really different from the K1. So remember the K1 had windage adjustable rear, elevation adjustable front. No longer the case on the K2. Fixed front sight blade, now the elevation and windage is taken care of in the rear of the rifle with the rear sight. You have two drums. This is your windage adjustment drum, and this is your elevation adjustment drum with elevation markings for different ranges. So when you want to go to a different range, watch the rear sight here, and you'll see how it just kind of cams that rear sight up and down. Kind of cool. So we'll put it on 2.5, so it has 4, 5, and 600 meters, 2.5, 4, 5, and 600. Same fixed charging handle that reciprocates with the gun. Now this one has extra a rubber thing put on it, aftermarket. It's so on there that I'd have to cut it off, so I've just left it over the years. And remember when I talked about on the K1 how it didn't have any facilities for mounting optics? By the time the K2 came around, see these screw holes here? That's so you could remove these, put a rail system up there. Back then it would have been like a Weaver rail or some other mount, and then screw it down, and then it would give this rifle the capability to run optics. So that was a big improvement. Moving forward, we have the same type of handguards that are held in place by one screw that are 2 halves with cooling holes on the top. And so it's very similar to the K1. Of course, we have a longer barrel. This is no longer direct gas impingement. This is a long stroke gas piston, which I'll show you here in a moment. Here's your regulator. And then you come out here to the end of the barrel, and you'll notice that it has kind of an A2 concept to it. So it's solid on one side and then slotted on the other, but you'll notice it's cockeyed. It's kind of like a slant brake on an AK. So it's vectoring gases up into the right o'clock, like right side, so like 1 or 2 o'clock position. It's meant to push the barrel down into the left under recoil. It's overly effective. So when you actually fire this gun, you'll feel the muzzle kind of dip down into the left when you fire it. But, you know, it's just threaded on there and you can swap it out. And I'm not sure that that's what they'll do on the S&T rifles. It may be manufactured here in the United States. So those are the basic features of the 2 different rifles. Let's go ahead and take this one apart. Now remember, we have a lock. I've disabled the lock. I can push forward on this now. It'll hinge open. And both rifles do have an M16 AR-15 style front pin here. You can push out to separate the upper from the lower. Didn't talk about that previously. Now you'll notice it's maintained the same type of fire control, so it's very much related to the AR-15 M16. Still have the fixed ejector and the same ping pong paddle there. We've gone from 2 recoil springs to 1 captured recoil spring and guide rod. Big change. It disassembles the same. Pull the charging handle out, and then here's your bolt and carrier, and there's your long stroke gas piston. Like the XCR, where they probably got the idea, this just sets in there. So it pretty much disassembles itself. There's your cam pin, and then we have a cotter pin back here that holds your firing pin in place and all that stuff. So definitely interesting. You can see that front sight a little bit better in the gas block. Very heavy protected front sight. That's cast aluminum, very thick. So it's quite durable. So which one do I prefer? I don't know. I like them both. The direct gas impingement K1 is wildly overgassed, so it's very punchy, and it doesn't feel much different than the rifle with its long stroke gas piston. If anything, maybe the rifle's smoother because it's a little bit bigger, and that long stroke gas piston adds some reciprocating mass, which can slow things down a bit. Got to remember to always put my charging handle in, which I once again forgot. Right there. So it's very easy to maintain. Again, it's all aluminum. Whoops. Upper and lower. Make sure that safety doesn't flip over because you won't get it back together. Flip your safety over and boom. There you go. Cool rifles for sure. All right, guys, so yes, we are very excited about the S&T rifles being manufactured here in the United States and bringing these classics back to market. Now, there's also rumors circulating SHOT Show 2025 that they may even go so far as to manufacture the current South Korean military service rifle, which I believe is called the K-13, which is an evolved product from these as well. Very sharp-looking rifle. But I'd be very happy to see these back on the market. They've made some updates to them, so they have, the ability to mount modern optics and things like that. But overall, it's just a great rifle, and they're promising that it will be affordable. What that's going to look like, I honestly don't know, but that gives me hope that these rifles will be serious competitors to the AR-15. And a lot of folks out there don't want direct gas impingement. They want a long-stroke gas piston, and this rifle was designed to be just that. And so it really has a lot of potential. They're accurate, they're fun to fire, they're great shooting rifles, and again, it'd be really cool to see them made right here in the United States, so future administrations, they have a much more difficult time trying to ban them from import because they're made right here. If you guys have any questions, please ask those questions down below. Do try to stick around for the first couple of days and answer any questions you guys may have. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is become part of our Patreon family, get early access to videos like this one. You'll get direct access to me. I answer all private communications, all sorts of other perks. Please check us out, link down below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and subscribe button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash either one of those buttons. You can help support us here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Swing by, check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 17 years of support. We'll talk to you guys soon.